Hello and welcome to Thrive After Divorce, where we want to keep giving you the tools to not just survive, but thrive during and after your divorce. And today we have Holly Rowlands. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And we are going to talk about the topic of narcissistic abuse and recovery. You are a narcissistic uh, abuse and trauma coach.
Mhm.
And we are going to talk about how to recognize, recover, and rebuild when you've been a victim to a narcissist. And, this is a personal topic to me, and I can tell I'm already kind of rattled just by my intro wasn't too smooth. But here you are in the driver's seat, literally. And you were coming to us. We had a little internet connection, and you were kind enough to hop in your car and just keep it going. So thank you.
There you go. This was option B because option A didn't work, but here I am.
It kind of goes with the theme of today's thing. We got to go with option B because option A isn't working with a narcissist. So as a narcissistic abuse and trauma coach, tell me what brought you to narcissistic recovery.
Well, I was married for 37 years to a narcissist who I didn't know was a narcissist.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Because I don't know many people that are with a narcissist and familiar or recognize what they're in.
It's what I say. Knowing that you're married to a narcissist is like on a need to know basis. They totally unravel. Why would you suspect that your husband is a narcissist? I mean, we're all so busy as women. I was running my business. I mean, my kids are grown up, but when it all started, I mean, they weren't. And we're just so busy as women and multitaskers that I think, number one, we ignore a lot and we forgive a lot. And it's not until a threshold is reached that you're like, I got to do something about this.
Yeah. And sometimes that threshold can be a big one, a dangerous one for many.
Yeah. And sometimes it can come on gradually, and other times, like I honestly felt, and I'm sure it wasn't this way, but I think it's a threshold was met. I could feel that our relationship, I mean, I knew something wasn't right, but it's not until we went on a trip. And I have 4 children. 2 of our kids were there. And, they were young adults. One was a teenager. And my husband literally stopped looking at me or talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it was this threshold was actually just reached where I'm like, now we're in a new dimension here. But I didn't know about narcissism. And I wouldn't know about it for like 3 or 4 more years. I just thought, is he mentally unstable? I mean,
Right.
and I was particularly busy. So I just kind of put him on the back burner, which I'm not saying I advise this, but it was just in a point in my life. I kind of didn't care. I think I was so fed up with him that I'm like, I'm just going to do my own life. And divorce was on the back burner, but it really wasn't on the forefront yet.
Right.
But, then fast forward, and maybe it was 3 years, I had gone to a lady who was very intuitive. And she said, Holly, your husband's a narcissist. And I'm like, wait, what? I mean, we all hear that term, right?
Right.
But you don't know the ins and outs of what that means. And so when I started reading about narcissism.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Are you there?
oh no.
Okay.
So after I had learned from this lady that, she said, your husband's a narcissist, I started reading all about it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, he totally fits the bill. But he didn't in the respect that he was very, like, I married him because he was so easygoing. Like, he did not have a temper at all. Like, never yelled at me, never yelled at the kids, was the perfect father, and was still doing a lot of great things, like provided, went to work every day, was very stellar at holding a job, buying all my favorite foods. But he started to like not do his duties around the house, like yard work and stuff like that. But it comes on gradually. So you
Yeah.
you can't put the pieces together
Yeah.
years down the road. But my point is, once I found out about narcissism, that was the beginning of the end. Because one of the first things you learn is they're not going to change.
And
And
you can't change them.
no, and I can't change them, and they get worse with age.
They do. And you know what I forgot to mention in the beginning is that you specialize, you help Christian women in
Mhm.
toxic relationships. And I see this being such a huge group that I get the biggest responses from, because it's, I think, a even bigger internal struggle because you're really going against true deep beliefs that you've had ingrained about marriage or love or supporting your partner or what we do for each other. And it just it almost allows your beliefs to keep you in an abusive, toxic relationship.
Well, and couple that with many women are being spiritually abused because their husbands are, I mean, maybe a pastor, for
Yeah,
instance.
no, it's huge because it fits a narcissistic pattern once you realize what it
Right,
is.
right. And so that puts another element of confusion in.
Now there's four types of narcissism, and you're you bring up recovering from covert.
Oh,
Oh, okay. So the covert narcissist, is that what you more specialize in, dealing with that?
yes, more covert, which for people that don't know what that word means, it's very like undercover, and
Mhm.
it can come on so gradually and be so nuanced that you can think it's something else. It's not until you learn all the defense mechanisms that narcissists use that you can start to see a pattern. And the reason I work with Christian women is because narcissism is a spiritual issue. It's actually the consummate battle between good and evil. That's what narcissism is. And so to not be savvy about how it truly is a spiritual issue, I mean, that you're missing a vital component.
Tell me about that, because I don't think I've had anyone talk about it. I've read about it. I've studied it myself, but I haven't talked about it or had anyone talk about the spiritual idea behind narcissism.
Well, so narcissism is fueled by the spirit of Jezebel. And Jezebel is a principality, a very powerful principality. And it can affect both men and women. I mean, Jezebel in the Bible with Elijah, she was a woman. And so a lot of people associate Jezebel with, being a female, but it's not gender specific. It can affect both men and women. And if you remember that story about Elijah, he had called down rain from heaven. He had done all these miracles, and then he's cowering under a tree from that woman, Jezebel. And that's how terrorizing this principality can be. It keeps people in a state of confusion and intimidation and fear. And so a lot of women, I mean, especially if their husband is in a spiritual, has a position of spiritual authority,
Yeah. And followers, people are following him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they may already be intimidated. And then you get this spirit of Jezebel that's influencing them. And it can just be so overpowering for people that they're intimidated. You're not going to confront someone when you're intimidated.
No.
Right?
And, you know, there's a lot of things that are fear-based and we can work through and work around. There's other things that are truly danger. Like when you know a personality will hurt you or come after you or destroy your name or tell lies about you, there's a danger element. I mean, it's not just in your head. It's not just a fear.
No, it's well, and they can get so much worse when you try to divorce them or you fall out on their stuff, or, you know, say no to a narcissist. This is what I tell people. If you want to know for sure, say no to them, see how they react, because narcissists, they don't have emotional intelligence.
No.
And so they're the equivalent of maybe a 5-year-old emotionally.
They are.
I always told my husband, your grandkids are more emotionally mature than you are. And so you've got this man in an adult body.
No, a toddler, like a toddler boy in an adult man's body.
A scary combination.
It is, because when a toddler throws a tantrum or a fit from a no, we can play it off and say, he's having 2-year-old tantrum. No, but when an adult man does, and you add the Jezebel effect, it can be very cruel.
Very cruel and very dangerous, and it gets worse with time.
Yep.
But
go ahead. I'm sorry.
But as the behavior worsens, the victim is getting more and more confused and downtrodden, and self-esteem is taking a hit. I mean, it's just a recipe for relational disaster.
I read once, they don't end up in the hospital, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you feel like you're nuts? You feel like you're going crazy.
Yes. And you know what I love? I've never heard the Jezebel. I've read it because I follow you on Facebook. So I've read, you know, what you put. But so often narcissistic, you know, is compared to Greek mythology and the narcissist and the guy looking in the water and seeing his reflection. So, which, you know, it's like, okay, he's vain. But the Jezebel effect really talks about, it's a darkness. It is dark versus light, good versus evil.
Well, and I started to really feel that this is a spiritual battle. We are not fighting against flesh and blood, which is hard to wrap your head around, because it feels like when this person is standing in front of you and you can't reason with them, and the best part is they're blaming you. I mean, it just is a mind trip on you. But that Jezebel is the spirit of confusion too. So it makes sense. But that's why narcissists all seem to follow a specific pattern, because they're run by the same demon.
Now, when you teach women to recognize the subtle signs of abuse, what are a few of the subtle signs? And I say that because the key word is subtle. It's not going to be like pow. They don't walk through the door with a t-shirt that says, I'm a narcissist.
Right.
Right. That it's subtle. So what are some of those subtle signs you warn?
A lack of accountability, I think, is really big. And that can be, I mean, obviously kind of subtle too, because you can't, maybe you don't recognize that maybe you think, oh, well, you know, it really was my fault, or maybe it was someone else's fault. Narcissists are notorious for making poor financial choices. And well,
even though they're obsessed with money, most of them are obsessed with money.
Yeah. And most women are too busy in their own lives. They're not, they don't know their husband's financial world. And so if they lose a lot of money or whatever, they can say, well, it was so-and-so's fault. Well, I mean, I didn't have the knowledge to call him out on that. So the lack of accountability, but honestly, the biggest one for me is their lack of empathy.
Right, like
Uh,
truly, to get people to understand, no, there is no empathy, like
there's
none. Not like they choose to ignore it. It doesn't exist.
it'll make your blood just curdle
Mhm.
because people cannot understand that. But there is a distinction between intellectual and emotional empathy. And narcissists are cunning, right? So they can have intelligence. They can say to someone, "Oh, I can
Yes.
see you're hurting," but that doesn't mean that they feel it on an emotional level. It's they're con men.
I was gonna say, or they act like they have empathy, to say the right words, to gather intel to use against you later.
And that would be an example of intellectual empathy.
Mhm.
It's all about the facade. But
Yeah.
when you start to call them out on their stuff and you start to not let them control you, that's when these defense mechanisms will worsen.
And now, what about you had 4 children? I see so much. It's really hard on divorce is hard on children at any age, children to adult children. But how did you deal with realizing what you did? Did you tell your children or do you keep it from them?
Well, that was a process. I kept it from them because the first like 3 or 4 years I didn't know. I'm
Mhm.
like mentally ill, which
Do
I
you
mean,
think
no,
they could see something?
yeah. And I'm sure a lot of women, they're like, what is happening? I need to help him,
Well,
right?
and it comes a lot of times when people think he's having a midlife crisis or it's an
Exactly.
age thing because it usually peaks, but it's
Mhm.
not that.
Well, and my husband is a somatic narcissist. I'm not sure if you've heard that term before.
I haven't heard somatic.
They're into their bodies, they're into their looks.
Oh, I thought that was just all uh I was thinking
That
somatic nervous system, but yeah, no, yeah. Go, please explain that.
there's intellectual narcissists who, love being the smartest person in the room, and they're the ones that have PhD, go
Mm,
after and learning. But somatic narcissists, which my ex-husband was, they're very much into their looks. And he was never that way. I mean, he was into fitness and he was, into keeping his body looking good. But at one point it got so bad, like, you're worse than a 14-year-old girl, teenage girl. Stop. I mean, it was creepy to see a middle-aged man so concerned about his looks.
yeah, because they can't handle losing it because they relied on it for so long to
Mhm.
get, and it's a tool to
Right.
them.
Right.
Now, you have the toxic relief room.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
that's my
love that name. So tell me about the toxic relief room.
Well, when I was trying to come up with a name for it, there's so many groups on narcissism. And I'm like, I'm going to do like a different twist to this because narcissists are toxic, right? And
Right.
we relieve from toxicity. So that it popped into my brain and I felt good about it.
I like it.
Toxic relief room.
Relief
Yeah.
room. I love the play in my mind and like room to get relief, a safe place
There you
and nest to, to join. It's to me, I love the toxic relief room to grow, room to expand, room to heal,
go. Oh, I
everything.
thought of it that way.
Oh,
That Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Well, another reason too is many people, many women, they know they're in a toxic relationship and they know something is so very desperately wrong, but they don't know they're married to a narcissist.
and
So that's
now,
another.
and when you specialize with Christian women, do you think a struggle is sharing it with their other friends that they'll be judged about leaving for divorce?
Oh, absolutely. Well, but you can't explain to other people what's happening. Like when people now today will ask me, why did you get divorced? I really just want to say my husband went nuts. And they're like, you can't tell people that.
No.
My
So
husband,
did you get a lot of kickback from your personal friends that maybe had religious or Christian views and tried to encourage you to stay?
no, my friends were understanding. And back to your question about my children, I did try to hide it in the beginning. Like
Yeah.
I was still having family dinners every Sunday, going out. My husband would take everybody out to dinner on Friday nights. And I was trying to keep the feeling of normalcy. But then, things continue to unravel. And I did say to my kids, you guys are grown, you're whole, you had a good childhood, you're not fractured. You have a right to know what went down. Your dad has a personality disorder. He does. I was a health practitioner for years before, and I actually married that in my business, health coaching and relationship coaching, because women can't get out if their health is, if they're on the floor. And so I would say to my kids, if dad had pancreatic cancer, would I be hiding it? But see, it's that stigma of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'm blabbing it. He has MP. I'm like, you guys are adults. You have a right to know what went down.
And the difference, if somebody had pancreatic cancer, it wouldn't affect you toxically. I mean, you wouldn't leave. And
No,
that's the problem. People, when they think mental disorder, they start to feel sorry for the person and think he has a disorder, or I can change it or fix it. And you got to go run, because you're not changing. It's not cancer. It's
right. It's a cancer of the soul.
It is. But I mean, for people like you not sympathize and you feel sorry. You just got to go.
Well, and people stuck too. We always want to have hope in life, right?
Yeah.
Want to have hope. You can't with a narcissist, and women will stay for years because I can love him enough. We'll go to counseling. Well, no, counseling does not work with narcissists. It actually puts the blame on the spouse very many times.
Yes. It does more harm than good for
It
many.
does more harm than good. I think it just ostracizes women more.
No, it does.
So
Because
no,
they usually get the
counseling
therapist.
doesn't work. I mean, you have to have it.
Now, how do you direct women to rebuild a better life after divorce once they've come through this trauma, to not repeat the past?
It's all about doing the inner work and the healing. Once they can recognize what they went through and they can internalize that it's not them. I mean, maybe, we regret how we've handled things, but because narcissistic abuse is so covert, women need to come to recognize what happened to me, and it wasn't me. And so then to start to recover your mental health and your physical resiliency, and then rebuild, start to rebuild your finances and your career, your spirituality, because you've been through this, and narcissistic abuse, it permeates every single aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm. It does.
There's a lot of work to be done, and the remedy is not to jump into another relationship.
No.
No, no, no. No, right?
And we want that. I mean, a lot of people want that because they feel that they just makes them think, I just want to be loved by a good person, or a good, like, you almost feel robbed. You feel robbed. Like, I know what I had was an illusion. Now I want the real thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we all want support and love when we're going through our time. And you literally were robbed, because that's what the devil does. Its job is to steal, kill, and destroy. So that's what he has come in to do in women's lives. What better way to tear down the fabric of society than to attack it at its root, at its foundation, at home and family.
Now, how, once you told your children, do you think they could see it, or are they kind of like, okay, that's mom's point of view? Or did it help to bring light to them to protect them from maybe future harm?
I think with my youngest daughter, she was with him the most because she was living at home at the time. I know it was hard on her. I because he was so good to her, but yet she could see how he was treating me. But because he was not overt in his abuse, and he was still going to work, and he was making the mortgage payment, and I mean, it looked fairly normal on the outside, but she could see the neglect and him ignoring me and him not looking at me and him not talking to me. She could see that, but she was young enough that, I couldn't parse out what was happening really until I found out about narcissism. So she really couldn't. My kids can see now. I've been divorced almost a year, and they can see it now, but it's been a journey. So I tell women, if you've raised your kids right, they know who you are. I mean, once they get to adulthood, they know who their mother is, right? They'll come around, and there may be a season where they're mad at you for breaking up the family or, whatever. But I think they'll come around in many cases.
Now, because you said overt, and we were talking about covert. For people listening that have not heard those terms, how do the difference of an overt compared to covert?
Well, an overt narcissist is more like the bully and the comedian. They can be brash, and they can be obnoxious, more like the braggers. They're more obvious in their behaviors. Whereas a covert, well, so we've talked about somatic narcissism. It's not like I can point my finger and say, he's obsessed with his body, I'm going to divorce him. Well, no. Right? You have to look at all the different aspects of what they're doing. The lack of empathy was huge for me, but I've had generally good health, so it's not like I've been sick that much. When I was sick, he was not there for me, but that was a handful of times. And so I remember one incident when I was in my 30s, and it's not what he did, it's what he didn't do. That's more what covert is. It's what they're doing behind the scenes that you can't, I don't know, you can't really put it together. And if you don't know,
it's more insidious. It's so insidious that and it could be anybody in your life, not just a spouse, a coworker, a friend, but the covert can make it's very subtle, but it's just as damaging.
Yeah, and it can come on so gradually. So with my ex-husband, he was doing so many good things. So I remember that day after, he didn't show any empathy at all when I had been sick. In fact, I remember looking at my 12-year-old daughter. I was just pleading with her, can you help me? And she did. I had a 2-year-old. I was sick. I couldn't get out of bed, and my husband wasn't helping me, and I needed her help. And this was years before I would figure out narcissism. But the next day, he's going grocery shopping and doing all these good things. So it's a mind trip. Being caught trip. It is.
It is. And then the anger and the trauma gets buried in our bodies.
It's in our DNA.
It's in our tissue, the DNA, the tissues, you have to do so many layers to heal from narcissistic abuse, from your mind to your habits, to your body, to releasing the trauma, because it's been building for years. It's not just
for years and years. And women's confidence is, you have no confidence. And I think the worst thing about it is what it does to us physiologically. And I know how the processes in the body work. So the stress response, we are meant to get into that for maybe 30 minutes as we're running from a tiger. Well, women, that stress response that they should get out of in 30 minutes, well, 30 years later, they're still in it. So they have high blood sugar, they have high insulin, which messes with their female hormone. So you're in this stress response where the high cortisol levels are making you, lack of a better word, dumb. You can't think straight. You can't sleep. You're putting on weight, which is not good. It's not a confident leader, right? And so you've got all these physiological factors at play, and you're in shreds emotionally. Mentally, you can't think. Spiritually, you're undone, probably. I mean, maybe. And so how do you go file for divorce? Especially
When you get out of it, talking about the cortisol and everything you're addicted to, then we move into the next phase for many, which is the trauma bond. And a lot of that is chemicals in our body that we've been used to in the abuse pattern, and that it's really quite a subject for people that just say he was a narcissist. I'm like, if that's all you say and you do no other studying, I don't believe you're with a narcissist. Just because he liked to look in the mirror or could be arrogant. No, a narcissist, it's a destructive Jezebel force that comes into your life. And now you say Jezebel force, and since you counsel a lot of Christian women, are there any Christian or spiritual forces you call on to battle that, like Archangel Michael, or do you have any, like, a biblical response that you rely on?
Well, I've experienced a lot of spiritual warfare in my life where, and I don't want to freak anybody out, but I can feel the demonic entities in my room. I just use my declarations. I command them to leave. Anyone who's a born again believer in Christ, the enemy is already defeated. We are operating from a stance of victory. It's already done. And I just command them to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. And you know what? They do. Because they know that they're defeated.
Yeah.
You have to bring out your spiritual weapons of war, because that's what we're in a war.
No, I asked that because I would call on Archangel Michael to protect me a lot, or call on different things, which is out to whoever's listening, your belief system, what you believe. But I would ask for protection in prayers, and it brought me even deeper into my faith. I mean, I was already very much into it, but when you really, those are the tools, your biggest protectors to protect you.
And every day you have to be very diligent. And so part of my program is dialing in your relationship with God. The spirituality, this is huge.
Yeah, because it could derail it very easily.
We have to stay strong and committed. Commitment is basically just recommitment. You're recommitting every day. I mean, it could be this, exercise. We're recommitting every day. And that's how it is to our spiritual life. You need to have a rich spiritual life.
So what words of advice would you give as a trauma coach on narcissistic abuse to someone listening right now? How would you wrap it up?
I would say that if you are in a toxic relationship and you suspect your husband's a narcissist, get all the resources you can to help you unpack what happened to you, because then you're going to see this wasn't all me. Narcissist blame. I mean, my husband said, you were mean to me. I was mean to you. Could you give me more details on that? I was mean to you. I've supported him for all these years, right? I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not. I mean, I had a lot of flaws, but I was willing to work on the relationship. So recognition comes first. And then honestly, I know a lot of women need to stay I mean, they have I didn't have little kids. I mean, it was easier for me to leave. But if things things will continue to spiral. I guess what I'm trying to say, get out. There.
Yeah.
Did
No,
I
I
say
mean,
enough?
yeah, you have
But
to. And I always say knowledge is power.
yeah, yeah,
Educate yourself.
yeah.
Now,
But I
tell us.
clarify though, if a woman has to stay, that can be very triggering for a trauma coach to say, get out. Well, if she doesn't have any of her own money, and narcissists are deplorable with money when you get divorced, I don't want anyone to feel guilty. She said, I have to, maybe you have to stay, but that's where education comes in. Because if you know what's happening to you, you can minimize the damage while you're in the battle. We're in a battle. We're on the battlefield. You're a soldier. So you have to be strategic in how you function as a soldier.
Yes. And even if you can't leave now, you can start escape plan or start thinking, and like you said, minimize the damage while you're there, and surround yourself with places like your Facebook group or things to keep you, uplifted and energized, your fellow soldiers on the field with you.
Come from a place of strength, fight from a place of strength. But if you can leave, and a lot of people think, well, it's better for my kids if I stay. But depending on how bad your husband is, what are you really teaching your children? I mean, you're teaching them that abuse, and even if it's just neglect, which is terrible, that they're learning that and they're internalizing it. So ask yourself, what am I teaching my children about relationships?
It's just, there's never going to be an easy answer with a narcissist. There's not an easy way. There's not an easy answer. The only thing you can do is educate yourself, protect yourself, learn, and just keep reaching out for resources and groups. Because it's not just like you can just join a singles group. It's a different category. I mean, not singles like to date, but I mean singles like other women's groups or things like that. Or just go to couples counseling. What's that?
Join a bunch of different groups on Facebook.
Yeah.
No, each one has its own dynamic.
Yep. So tell us about yours. Where can we'll have all your information in the show notes, but tell in your own words where people can find you, what you do, where you are.
I'm on Facebook under Holly Roylance. That's where that's my profile name. If you go to that, you'll see, just scroll down and you'll see a link to my website with it, which is empoweringprincesses.com. And then underneath that link is the link for my Facebook page. And I would love to have you join. I post a lot about, the spiritual aspect of narcissism, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
I'm not just bashing narcissists.
No, and it's good to get a different viewpoint on all of it. Like I said, from the spiritual to the practical every day, but it was following you that, I saw the first thing on Jezebel. And like I said, I've only seen it compared to the Greek narcissism. And it's just, no matter what knowledge, you can filter out what works for you or what doesn't. The more knowledge, the more power.
And I firmly believe that women need to figure out what happened to them, and the whole trauma piece too. I mean, I've been divorced for a year. Well, I lay in my little rental in the forest at night, and I can literally feel the trauma just seeping out of my cells. Well, I'm thankful that I know about trauma and how that works, because then I can look down on myself like on a third person and think, that's what's happening here. It's empowering. It is.
It really is. And the more aware I think the more you can wrap your mind around it, then you can start to unwrap your body around it. If that makes sense.
Exactly. And that's where support from other women come in. because, and it makes it easier to talk about your story because you don't feel like you're such an idiot. There's all these women that have gone through the same thing. And
Yes.
there's power in numbers. There just is.
There is. It's a collective whole. We come together, we get there faster, we support each other, and I absolutely agree. And I'm very thankful for meeting you, for having you do this with me today. And we didn't get to meet or introduce, but it looked like you had a little puppy on your lap.
Yes, my little dog is with me. She goes everywhere with me.
Well, thank her for being here with us.
The primary person in my life.
All right. And I look forward to learning more in the toxic relief room.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. I appreciate your support.
You're welcome. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.